11:56. Looking at Exhibit 2 in paragraph 5, do you have any copies of emails sent by you or received by you from Michelle Romain, Kelly Romain, Michael Romain, JoAnn Matouk, members of the Abood Law Firm or members of 1-800-Law Firm, including but not limited to Solomon Radner, for the time frame of January 1, 2010 through today's date?
No.
Have you ever received emails from Michelle Romain?
Yes.
Have you ever sent emails to Michelle Romain?
I'm not certain.
Have you ever received emails from Kelly Romain?
No.
Ever received emails from Michael Romain?
No.
Have you ever sent emails to Kelly Romain or Michael Romain?
No.
Have you ever sent an email to JoAnn Matouk?
I don't believe so.
Have you ever received an email from JoAnn Matouk?
I don't believe so.
Have you ever received any emails from anyone at the Abood Law Firm?
Yes.
All right, about the disappearance of JoAnn Matouk Romain?
Yes.
And when did you last receive an email, to the best of your recollection, from the Abood Law Firm?
Oh, I'm sorry. We're talking about the Abood Law Firm. I thought we were...
Well, that's
talking about
next on the list.
I don't think I received emails from Abood.
Have you received any emails from 1-800-Law Firm?
Yes.
All right. When's the first time you remember receiving an email from someone who claimed they were associated with 1-800-Law Firm?
In 2014.
All right. And what about that email, if you remember, was discussed?
I'm not certain. I don't remember.
Have
exactly
you
what
had
it was.
multiple conversations with Solomon Radner?
Before you answer, could you please speak up? You're trailing
I'm
off.
having, yeah, I'm having a very difficult time, Mr. Hawkins. So
Okay.
Please
Do you
raise your
want
voice.
to ask the question? I can answer it louder.
How many conversations do you recall having with Solomon Radner before today's date with respect to the disappearance of JoAnn Matouk Romain?
Maybe 3,
3.
approximately.
Were they in person, over the phone? You've already told me you've had some emails, so how many times have you corresponded with him, either verbally, email, or in person?
A handful of times. So
All right.
Not-
And
not-
what have you
not to a
discussed
great
with him?
when the affidavit that was written,
He discussed with you what he'd like to see if you would put in your affidavit?
no, sir.
By the way, when you were meeting those 3 hours with William Randall, did anybody compensate you for the time you spent with Mr. Randall?
No, sir.
Are you paying for your attorney today, or is someone else?
I'm paying.
All right, you're not being reimbursed by JoAnn Matouk, for instance.
No.
All right. Where were you when you signed the affidavit in June of 2014?
Southfield, Michigan, and
At 1-800-Law Firm?
yes,
Anyone else present when you signed that?
Mr. Radner, I believe Mr. Kresh.
And did they tell you why they wanted an affidavit from you?
They said I was a valuable witness. They wanted my information.
Did they type out the affidavit for you?
I believe one of the ladies that works at the law firm did.
Did you write anything out in longhand before this affidavit was typed up?
No,
Were you presented with the affidavit in typewritten form and asked to review it, and then asked if you could agree with the statements that were contained in the affidavit?
yes, and we had a few revisions that,
You remember what was revised from the initial affidavit you were presented with?
most everything was accurate with the exception of a few details, and once everything was accurate, then I agreed to sign.
All right, what were the few details that you can remember that were not accurate?
I don't recall exactly which. They're minor details, but I wanted it to be 100% accurate before I put my signature on it.
And is it 100% accurate now that you have signed it in June of 2014?
I believe so.
Any conversations with anyone at 1-800-LAW FIRM since June? And what was the date? The 14th? Look at the last page. It was sometime in 2014, but I can't remember. June what?
19th.
June 19th. Have you had any subsequent conversations with anyone at the 1-800-LAW FIRM since signing that affidavit?
Yes.
How many?
Two or three.
With whom?
Ari Koresh.
Anyone else?
I don't think so.
In those 2 or 3 conversations with Ari Kresh, do you remember what calendar year they occurred in after you signed your affidavit on June 19th, 2012? Or 14, I should say.
14, it was that year.
All right, so they were all in 2014? The 2 or 3 that you had with him?
I believe I spoke with him briefly once this year.
So
Maybe.
one time in 2016. How many in 2015?
0.
So if you had 2 or 3 conversations, 2 would have been following the June 19th, 2014 timeframe up until this conversation you had sometime in 2016.
Yes.
All right. When in 2016 did you speak with him?
Approximately a month ago.
All right. What'd you talk about?
It was a brief conversation. He called me. And I think he gave me a little bit of an update on the case.
So some type of a summation.
No.
An update. What did he update you on?
I don't recall the exact conversation. He asked me how I was doing and that the case was proceeding.
Did he send you anything to review?
No.
Did anyone from 1-800-LAW FIRM send you anything to review?
I don't believe so, no.
All right. Looking at Exhibit 2, number 6, do you have copies of any cell phone ledgers from January 12th, 2010 to today's date?
No, I don't.
You could get those if we asked you to procure them, I'm assuming.
I don't know how
Who's
to do
your
that.
cell phone carrier?
Verizon?
And was it Verizon in 2010?
I believe so,
And
yes.
has it remained Verizon from then till today?
Yes.
All right. Look at number 7 on Exhibit 2. Do you have any of those materials other than the materials you have already produced, which we've marked Exhibits 3 through 12?
There's a lot of names here. Could you be more specific, please?
Take your time. I can read all those names out loud, or you can read them to yourself.
Okay.
And I guess I'm just trying to be as brief as possible in asking you if there's anything within that description at number 7 that you have and have not produced that we've marked as exhibits 3 through 12.
I believe no.
Look at number 8. Are there any materials described in paragraph 8 that have not been produced by you that we've marked as exhibits 3 through 12?
I believe no.
Look at number 9. Anything in addition that you have described therein that you have not produced?
That's other than the 2 photos
Correct.
provided today.
Right, all of the materials.
I believe no.
All right. Look at number 10. Other than the materials we've produced, exhibits 3 through 12, and the 2 cellular photos that will be marked shortly, are there any other materials that fit that description that you have?
No.
Look at number 11. But for exhibits 3 through 12 and the 2 cell phone photos, any materials that fit that description that you have not already produced that you possess?
I believe no.
Okay. Now, you've identified that you spoke to 3 investigators that you believe were working for the estate of JoAnn Matouk Romain. We briefly talked about Bill Randall and on how many occasions you met with him once and had 1 phone call, as I recall your testimony, correct?
With who?
Randall. He took your statement on January 27th, 2012.
Yes.
All right. And the first time you would have spoken to him would have been sometime in 2012 to arrange that interview?
I'm not certain I spoke with him before or if the law firm set up the meeting.
All right. Of the 3 individuals you recall speaking with, that being Bill Randall, the Salvatore Rastorelli, and Scott Lewis, to the best of your memory, who's the first one that you spoke with?
Randall?
Okay. And when do you first speak to him, as best you can recall? We'll start with calendar year.
January 2012.
All right. When did you speak to Scott Lewis?
After there was an article in the other Grosse Pointe newspaper, the Advertiser Times, and he was featured on the front page. In the article, he said he thought it was a murder and a cover-up.
And this was after you had spoken to Bill Randall, that you read this article.
This was like 2 years later.
So that would have been 2014,
I believe so.
the same year you gave your affidavit.
Yes.
What did you call Scott Lewis, or did he?
I believe I called him
All right. Why did you call Scott Lewis?
because I was concerned with the information he had published in the newspaper. It was
Well, what concerned you? Did he have police reports? Did he have witness statements?
the fact
Or did
that
he just make a conclusion based on his belief?
I'm not certain what he had or didn't have, But the fact that it was a published newspaper article where he claimed it was a murder and a cover-up was a bit concerning.
Well, you already had knowledge that newspapers didn't always accurately report the truth, in that when you met with the FBI in 2012, they told you, in spite of what the paper said, they had not opened an investigation. True?
With regard to the Grosse Pointe News, it seemed that there were bogus articles being published.
So you knew in your mind's eye that it was also possible that this was bogus publication with respect to Scott Lewis. True enough?
I wasn't certain, that's why I called him personally.
And when you spoke to him in 2014, can you be more precise with respect to when in 2014 you spoke to Scott Lewis?
I believe it was January.
And did he tell you, Mr. Lewis, that he was no longer working on the case?
He did after we had about a 20-minute conversation
On the phone or in person?
on the phone.
All right. What else did you tell him?
I think I was asking questions.
Did he indicate that he knew who you were?
Yes, he had been a customer at the gallery. I had met him in person prior. And
Did you ask him if he had seen your statement from January 19th, 2010?
I don't think so.
Did you ask him if he had seen the report Mr. Randall wrote in 2012 following your interview?
I don't believe I asked him that.
Did you ask him any questions as to what it was he reviewed that allowed him to conclude there was a murder with a cover-up?
I remember him stating, telling me over the phone, he said, last night the Michigan State Police had their best investigator on this case. He said, as of this morning, that's no longer true. Somebody got to somebody. It's political, and I have nothing to do with this case anymore. And that's when the conversation ended.
That was Scott Lewis that told you that?
Yes,
And did he identify who the Michigan State Police investigator was he was referring to?
no, he didn't.
He gave you the impression, nonetheless, that he was no longer on the case as of sometime in January of 2014, correct?
Yes.
Did you ask him any more questions about the statement that you just testified to that he allegedly told you?
I didn't. I was concerned. It was,
What did you do following that conversation? Did you go back to the FBI?
no,
Did you go to any police or law enforcement agency?
no,
Did Mr. Lewis ever tell you that he had been threatened, his personal safety?
no, he didn't say that.
And he didn't threaten you, did he?
No,
Okay. Was that the only time you spoke with Mr. Lewis, that one phone call in January of 2014?
yes, I believe so.
Have you ever reviewed or read anything that Mr. Lewis may have written concerning the disappearance?
Just the article that was published in the Grosse Pointe Advertiser-Times newspaper.
All right, but that wasn't something that he wrote, that was something a reporter wrote, correct?
He was quoted in that article, yes.
All right. Have you read any of a written report authored by Scott Lewis, either in total or in part?
No.
All right. And that was the only time you spoke with him, correct?
Yes.
Then the next investigator was who that you spoke with?
I believe Salvatore Restorelli,
And when did you speak to him?
June 2015.
And how did you come into contact with him?
I was, I believe, through Michelle's lawyers.
The lawyers, i.e. 1-800-LAW firm, called you and said they'd like you to meet with Mr. Restorelli?
Restorelli.
Is that how it went down?
I believe so, yes.
And where did you meet him at? The law firm?
We met at St. Paul's Catholic Church on Lake Shore in Grosse Pointe Farms.
When?
June 2015.
And who was there besides this gentleman, this third investigator?
I believe Michelle and her sister Kelly were present.
All right. Did you witness Mr. Restorelli, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing it correctly,
Restorelli.
actually enter Lake St. Clair?
I didn't see him do that. He did take measurements. with the,
And,
tape
and
measure.
what was your purpose of meeting him at St. Paul's?
He wanted to ask me about what I saw that night.
Did you draw a diagram for him?
I didn't.
Did you produce any of the diagrams you had previously drawn for him?
No.
As I understand it, you saw what you saw in 2010 under entirely different weather conditions, i.e. January versus June, correct?
Yes, there's different weather conditions
All
from
right.
January. and
Did
June.
you block off any portion of Lakeshore Drive for these measurements?
I don't believe so.
And what did you show him that he measured?
I'm not certain what he was measuring.
How long were you there with him?
Say between 30, 45 minutes.
Excuse me, how long?
I believe about 30 or 45 minutes.
And it was that's the only time you spoke with him?
Yes.
Did you take any notes of that encounter?
No.
Did you take any photographs?
No.
Did you direct him to take any photographs of things you were describing? Say, Mr. Matouk, would you move to the parking structure or what?
No, sorry about that.
Okay, yeah, you just blew all our eardrums out. Did he provide you with anything that he wrote that day, copies of anything?
No, he didn't.
Any contact with him since? Phone, email, otherwise?
No.
Okay. Now, have you spoken to any of these three investigators in calendar year 2016?
No.
Let's go to the exhibits that you have produced for us, starting with exhibit number 3, the yellow
This.
legal pad paper with a sketch. Was exhibit number 3 completed by your efforts?
Yes.
Your efforts alone?
Yes.
There appears to be a name in the lower left corner of exhibit 3. Can you identify who that is?
Lydia Warren.
Who is Lydia Warren?
I believe she's a journalist.
A journalist with who?
I believe the Daily Mail, UK.
The Grosse Pointe Daily Mail?
The Daily Mail UK from London.
Oh, yeah? And then did you talk to Lydia?
No.
Why did you write her down on your sketch that we've marked as exhibit 3?
She wrote an article about the case.
And did you get a copy of that article?
No,
Were you quoted in that article?
I don't believe so.
How did you even learn about the article?
I read the paper, the internet edition of the Daily Mail.
And you saw it? And was that contemporaneous with the sketching that you did?
I don't believe so.
When was this sketch made by you that we've marked as Exhibit 3?
January 2010.
When in January of 2010? Before or after meeting with the Grosse Pointe Farms officers on the 18th?
It was after.
How long after?
48 to 72 hours.
Was it drawn by you before or after you wrote your handwritten statement to the Grosse Pointe police officers, dated the 19th of January?
After.
Did you ever provide a copy of Exhibit 3 to the Grosse Pointe Farms Police Department?
I've never been contacted by the Grosse Pointe Farms Police Department since I handed in my witness statement.
I'm going to move to strike your answer as non-responsive, and I'm again going to ask you to listen carefully to the question I asked you.
Okay.
Did you ever turn in a copy of Exhibit 3 at any time to the Grosse Pointe Farms Department of Public Safety?
No.
Did you at any point in time ever provide a copy of Exhibit 3 to the City of Grosse Pointe Woods Department of Public Safety?
No.
Did you ever provide the Michigan State Police with a copy of Exhibit 3?
No.
Did you ever provide the FBI with a copy of Exhibit 3?
No.
Did you provide any law enforcement agency with a copy of Exhibit 3?
No.
What possessed you to create Exhibit 3? Were you asked by someone to do it, or did you do this on your own accord?
I did it myself with the belief that the police may contact me for further information.
Well, you contacted the police initially at Grosse Pointe Farms, correct?
Yes.
Is there any reason why, regardless if they called you back or not, you didn't just drop by the police department and give them Exhibit number 3?
I believe Jensen told me if they needed me that he would call me, and I didn't receive a call, and I waited with this information, but I never.
Did you ever call anyone at the Grosse Pointe Farms Department of Public Safety and say, hey, I haven't heard from you, but I've got some sketches that I'd like you to take a look at?
No.
Do you consider these sketches an amendment to your statement to the police?
An amendment.
To the statement that you gave the Grosse Pointe Farms Police Department?
I just sketched the two men I saw that night, thinking I may be contacted by the police, and I would have a description of them.
Well, you gave a description of them to a degree in your written report, did you not?
Yes?
And any reason why you didn't sketch this out and attach these to your actual written statement before turning the statement in?
I went to the police on January 18th and turned in my written statement on the 19th. It's just a short time frame, so I produced these the following few days after that.
Did you give a copy of Exhibit 3 to any of the investigators? Yes or no?
I'm not certain. I may have given it to Randall, but I'm not certain.
Well, if you had given it to Randall, any reason you can think of why he did not include those within his report?
Objection calls for speculation. If he knows, he can answer. If he doesn't know,
I don't believe I gave them to any investigators.
Okay, that's fair enough. Now, looking at Exhibit 4, when did you create Exhibit 4?
Which one's that? Oh, this one. That's the same. They were both created at the same time.
And that was when?
January 2010.
How long did it take you to create Exhibit 3?
20, 30 minutes.
About Exhibit 4?
Same, 20 minutes. 20, 30
Now,
minutes.
let's talk a little bit about January 12th, 2010. What type of vehicle were you operating when you made the observations that you reported to the Grosse Pointe Farms Police Department?
A Jeep Cherokee.
What year?
Was it, I think it was a 2001.
Was that the same vehicle that you were operating that was tampered with that we've already testified, that you've already testified to?
Yes.
All right. So the vehicle on January 12th, 2010 was approximately 9 years old.
Yes.
Was there any damage to the windshield of that vehicle?
No.
Any damage to any of the windows of that vehicle?
No.
How many doors on that Jeep Cherokee?
4-door hatchback.
And what color was it?
Silver.
Remember what engine you had in that vehicle?
Straight six.
Automatic or stick?
Automatic.
Okay.
With 4-wheel drive.
When was the last time prior to January 12th, 2010, you had ever had the headlights of that 2001 Jeep Cherokee aligned?
Could you rephrase that, please?
Sure. When before January 12th, 2010, had you last had the headlights of that vehicle examined to ensure that their alignment, i.e. subsequent illumination, was within factory specifications?
I don't believe I had.
Had that vehicle ever been involved in any type of accident prior to January 12th, 2010?
Not that I'm aware of.
Had you ever replaced either of the headlights on that vehicle at any time before January 12th, 2010?
I'm not certain. I don't believe so.
At the time that you were making your observations on the night of January 12th, 2010, was your defroster for the front windshield activated?
I believe so.
Was it snowing at the time that you made your observations on Lakeshore on January 12th, 2010, as reported to the police and various investigators?
To my recollection, it wasn't snowing. There may have been a little bit of lake effect.
What do you mean by a little bit of lake effect?
Very, very little precipitation that comes off the lake when it's cold out.
Like fog or snow, or what do you describe it as? Is it raindrop precipitation? Ice droplets?
The lake, when it's cold, water evaporates. It's called lake effect snow.
So it can, what?
But for Lake St. Clair is a small lake, so it wasn't very, very practically negligible.
It did, however, impair visibility to at least some degree.
No,
Well, then how did you even see it if it was negligible to the point, how would you know it was there if you couldn't see it?
couldn't see what?
The lake effect.
I'm gonna object to the form and the foundation. I don't
That's
think he
fine, you can
testified.
answer the question.
He's seen the lake effect. He testified he knew it was there.
Go ahead and answer. Your objection's noted, but don't coach him.
There were a few snowflakes.
That were falling at the time you drove by what you saw on January 12th, 2010. True?
What's true?
The time you drove by what you've reported to the police on January 12th, 2010, there was slight snowfall. Is that what you're telling me?
Extremely slight.
Do you know if it had snowed during that day?
I'm not certain. I don't believe it had.
All right. Had your vehicle ever had any front end damage prior to the 12th of January 2010?
Not that I'm aware of.
Were you alone in the car at the time you made these observations?
Yes.
When you first made your observation, was there any traffic in front of you?
Yes.
Moving traffic.
Yes.
Moving in what lanes?
Northbound Lakeshore.
All right. How fast were you going? And do you know this? Strike that. Do you know the speed limit on Lakeshore?
Yes.
And you agree it's 35 miles an hour?
Yes.
And what were you traveling that evening? Speed limit?
Yes.
You weren't speeding, were you?
No.
So you were going 35. True?
To a certain point.
All right. Till what point? I'm assuming when you turned into your driveway or turned off to another street, you had
When
to
I
slow down.
pulled behind the two vehicles that were parked.
Did you stop behind the vehicle that you saw parked? Yes or no?
I came to I almost came to a full stop.
So how fast were you going? Did you then change lanes?
I was going at about less than walking pace
When you went,
when I pulled behind the two vehicles.
all right, so then what'd you do?
I observed the woman sitting at the brake
I
wall.
want to see I want to know what you did driving your vehicle. How long you told me you didn't stop behind these cars. You were work with me, going about a walking pace. Well, I'm assuming that if you didn't do some type of action, walking pace or not, you would have run into the vehicle in front of you. What did you do to avoid a collision?
When I attempted to stop, the first man came around behind the vehicle, and at first I thought he was reaching into his pocket to identify himself, and he pulled that hand out, put his hand in his pocket and waved me through. I at that point drove around the cars
So you made a left,
very
if you will.
slowly, and I rolled down my passenger side window to see if the woman was in distress, that she may yell for help or scream. I rolled down the window. When I went past the second vehicle, the second man came out to confront me.
He did confront you?
Well, he came to the front of the vehicle, and I looked back towards the woman, and I didn't see her motion or scream or anything like that. I thought I recognized the second person, and that disarmed me a bit.
Who did you think you saw?
I thought it was JoAnn Matouk.
All right. With respect to Exhibits 3 and 4 that you sketched, which of those individuals did you think was JoAnn Matouk?
3.
All right. So, then you continued home, as I understand it.
Yes.
This seemed to be something out of the ordinary to you, did it not?
Yes.
Did you had your cell phone with you that night?
I don't believe so.
Well, how much further was your home from the location of what you observed? Less than a mile?
I'd say approximately a mile.
And you went straight home, true?
Yes.
Any point in time you ever picked up the phone and called any law enforcement agency and reported that you saw something that you thought, as an almost lifetime resident of the Points, seemed out of place?
No.
Why not?
Well, at the time, the woman didn't scream for help. I thought I recognized the second individual. It was sort of familiar to me. And I
Went on your way.
made a mental note of the description of the two men in the vehicles in case there was something untoward that I could report it.
Now, what time were you working that day?
I believe I worked earlier in the day.
What time did you get done with work?
I believe 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock. Did you go home?
Yes.
Did you have a cocktail, a glass of wine, beer, anything like that?
No.
All right. Where'd you go? The farm market?
Farmers market. Yes.
All right. But you didn't have any cocktail before you left. True?
No, I didn't.
Did you smoke any marijuana or anything before you left?
No.
Are you a daily user of marijuana?
Objection.
For discovery only.
You're asking him to either admit to, which is still a federal crime, but it could be not a crime under state law. He has a Fifth Amendment right not to answer that question one way or the other.
Are you instructing him not to answer?
I'm instructing him not to answer that question.
All right. Had you taken anything before going to the market on January 12th, 2010, that impaired your vision? Yes or no?
No.
Did you take anything before going to the farm's market on January 12th, 2010, that impaired your ability to hear?
No.
Do you wear corrective lenses?
No.
Have you ever?
No.
Okay. When did you first learn of a missing person that has brought everyone here to this litigation?
That Tuesday was the day of the Haiti earthquake. The Tuesday. And that was dominating the news. I remember watching that. I believe it was either the following day or that Thursday where I saw the reports about the woman that was missing.
So about a Thursday is when you
Or
discovered
probably
it?
48 hours later.
All right, how did you find out about her being missing?
Watching the local news reports.
Did you see a photograph of her on the television?
I don't think so.
Did you see her name identified as to who the missing person was?
Probably, but I didn't know who that person was.
Did you contact any of the missing person's family members at any time before going to the Grosse Pointe Farms Police Department on the 18th of January?
No.
Did you speak to anyone about what you saw prior to going to the Grosse Pointe Farms Police Department on January 18th, 2010?
I believe I told a couple friends,
Which couple friends?
Dan Flanagan and Mark Fickney.
Why would you call Dan Flanagan and tell him what you saw? Is he a police officer?
He works for Friend of the Court, and he has two brothers that are in law enforcement.
All right. So what did you tell Dan?
I was driving on Lakeshore, and I saw a woman dressed in black with black hair sitting on the edge of the break wall.
Edge of the break wall being by the water's edge, I think is what you're trying to convey.
Yes, right on the edge near the water.
Okay. Anything else? Did you ask him, should I go to the police? Anything like that?
I believe I said it was very strange, and I'm concerned it may be related to the woman that's missing.
And what did Dan tell you to do, if anything?
I don't think he made any suggestions.
All right. Who was the other person, other friend that you spoke with?
Mark Fickney.
And when did you speak to Mark?
I'm not exactly certain, but it was shortly thereafter.
So it would have been, what, sometime after Thursday?
Within the first week or two. The week of the 18th or the week of the 25th.
So you may have spoken to Mark after you spoke to the police department in Grosse Pointe Farms on the 18th.
May have been.
All right. Let's mark these as the next exhibits.
You need a separate exhibit, George, or one exhibit?
Yeah, we'll make it two.
Down here.
Yep.
So the one with a tie will be the second one. For reference.
What?
Oh, is that a tie?
No. It's just objects in mirror appear closer.
Oh, I'm sorry. It looks with a
Sweater.
jacket open, the sweater. From upside down, it looked like a tie.
The drawing kind of looks like a hawk, doesn't it?
All right, Mr. Hawk, I'm going to show you what we have now marked as Exhibit 13, and would you just identify for the record what that appears to be?
That is the tar that was on the rearview mirror of my
All right.
car.
And you took this before going to the state police to report the tampering?
I believe so.
And what is Exhibit 14?
The same image from a different angle.
Was there anything about that tar that had any specific significance to you?
No.
Do you recall telling a police officer that you believed the tar was in the shape of a hawk and that you believed this was a message being sent to you by someone involved in the disappearance of JoAnn Matouk Romain?
I believe I said it was possible, yes.
Do you believe either of those images on Exhibit 13 and 14 resemble a hawk? And when I use the word hawk, I'm talking about the bird, the raptor that is a hawk.
To a certain extent, yes.
You agree it could just be a random blob as well?
I'm not certain how a random blob would appear of tar on a rearview mirror like that.
Somebody who drives by, it splashes up, things of that nature? I mean, you'd agree with me, would you not? That there's a whole lot more direct ways to let you know that we're watching you than putting a blob of something on your mirror?
I'm not certain. That's why I went to the police.
All right. And when you went to the police at Grosse Pointe Woods, you were there in person, were you not?
Yes.
And that officer went out and looked at the tar that you described in Exhibit 13 and 14, correct?
Yes, the first officer agreed that he thought my car had been tampered with.
Well, he also told you that he discovered tar elsewhere on the vehicle, did he not?
I don't remember that.
Well, do you remember tar being found on other locations of the car, including but not limited to the front of your car?
No?
So if he said that or told you, you have forgotten that by now, correct?
I don't believe he ever said that or told me that.
So if he states that in his written report dated January 25th, 2012, you disagree with the accuracy of that statement?
There were two officers involved that day. I'm not certain which officer you're referring to.
Either one of them.
The first one agreed. He said, your car's definitely been tampered with. He took photos.
And what did the other one do?
I'm not sure. At that point, I think we left. And
Well, did you talk to more than one officer on the 25th of January, 2012 at Grosse Pointe Farms Department of Public Safety?
no, sir, it was Grosse Pointe Woods.
All right. Did you talk to more than one officer at Grosse Pointe Woods on the 25th of January, 2012?
I'm not certain I remember the first officer.
But you don't remember a second one?
I don't remember speaking to a second one.
So you remember one officer on the 25th and then speaking to Shalat on the 26th on the telephone. Correct?
Yes. 2012.
Correct. Let's make that 15. Need to identify the number of pages, please.
4.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Hawk, I am now showing you Exhibit
15.
15, and you recognize that.
Yes, sir, that's the witness statement form I turned into Grosse Pointe Farms Police.
All right. And this was turned in on the date of January 19th, 2010
Yes.
at 9 a.m.
Yes.
And you filled out all of the information on the first page of exhibit number 15.
Yes.
And did you complete all of the information and drawings on page 2 of Exhibit 15?
Yes, that's my diagram.
All right. And on page 3 of Exhibit 15, is that the envelope that the entire statement was delivered in, addressed to Chief Jensen?
No, I believe I dropped that off subsequently.
You dropped off the Chief Jensen envelope subsequently?
Yes.
What was in the Chief Jensen envelope subsequently dropped off?
Did you say why or what?
Yeah, what was in it?
I believe I included a partial plate number of the black sedan.
And when did you provide that partial plate number of the black sedan?
I believe it was a week or two following dropping off the initial witness statement.
All right, look at page 4. Is that your handwriting that says partial plate number of black sedan, BHP?
Yes.
And that's what was in the envelope that is Exhibit 3, or page 3 of Exhibit 15, correct?
Yes.
And as I understand your testimony, after meeting and dropping off on January 19th your statement, you had no further conversation with anyone from Grosse Pointe Farms Department of Public Safety, true?
True.
Yet, if this partial plate was delivered to the Grosse Pointe Farms Department of Public Safety a week or two following your January 19th, 2010 statement, you delivered this partial plate after you had completed the sketches in Exhibit 3 and 4, which were done within the 48 or 72 hours that you've testified to, correct?
Yes.
So why didn't you give them the sketches that you drew that we've marked as Exhibit 3 and 4 when you gave them the partial plate number? Neither were requested from you by the police, were they?
No.
So why didn't you give them the sketches? Voluntarily give them what you believed depicted in your hand the identity of what you saw.
I'm not certain why I didn't include it. I included the partial plate number.
Had you talked to Michelle Romain before turning in the partial plate number?
I didn't even know who Michelle was until the following year.
When did you learn who Michelle was? What time frame?
January 2011.
Did you talk to JoAnn Matouk before turning in the partial plate number?
No.
Did you talk to Billy Matouk before turning in the partial plate number?
No.
Did you talk to any of the family members of the Romain or Matouk family before turning in the partial plate number?
No.
And at the time you turned in the partial plate number, it was your impression that at least one of the individuals that you described that you saw in Exhibit 15 was John Matouk, true?
Can you say that again, please?
Sure. At the time you turned in the partial plate description to the Grosse Pointe Farms Department of Public Safety, at that point in time, you were of the impression that one of the individuals you saw on January 12, 2010 at the waterfront was John Matouk.
I thought one of the individuals strongly resembled John Matouk.
All right. Look at Exhibit 15, if you would, the statement, which would be pages 1 and 2. Would you agree that this statement is accurate?
Yes, with.
Now,
the
can you explain to me why, well, strike that. Given your testimony that you were at the farms on the 18th, who did you meet with at that time?
I met with Jensen, McCarthy, and another detective, I believe.
Do you know
was
their name?
present.
Do you know the third individual's name?
I'm not certain of his name.
So if there was a third individual and it wasn't a detective but a public safety officer, you wouldn't quibble with that today, would you?
I'm not certain if it was a detective or a police officer, but he was present.
All right. And where did the meeting take place?
I believe it was the office of Jensen.
Jensen's office at Grosse Pointe Farms Department of Public Safety, correct?
I'm not certain, but I believe that was behind the
Did
doors.
he sit behind a desk, Director Jensen, when you spoke with him?
I think he was sitting on the edge.
All right. How long have you known Dan Jensen?
Over 30 years.
And where did you first meet him?
Probably when he was a patrol officer.
Did you socialize with him?
Not often. I remember prior to this seeing him at the Caju Cafe. We had been there together, or he had come in when I was there.
Would you consider him an acquaintance as opposed to a friend?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
Well,
did you take any notes during your discussion of the 18th with McCarthy and Jensen?
no, that's the only thing I don't have are the notes that McCarthy took.
Did McCarthy give you a copy of his notes?
No, that's what I don't have.
All right. Did you ever ask for those?
No.
All right. Now, I'm assuming that Exhibit 15 has the most complete and important recollections that you had as of the 19th of January 2010, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, this statement was filled out in your home, what, the evening of the 18th?
Yes, Jensen told me to take the statement home and to
Commit to writing what you had told him in the office.
fill it out and to bring it back.
And that's what you did.
Yes.
All right. How long did it take you to fill out Exhibit 15?
It's 30 minutes, approximately.
Nobody pressured you or rushed you to do that, did they?
No.
Complete this?
No.
Did you have anything to drink when you were filling this out? Glass of wine, highball, anything like that?
No.
All right. So nothing impaired your memory at the time you were filling this out, correct?
Correct.
Now, you indicate that the statement was given to Detective McCarthy. And by that, do you mean it was handed to him on the 19th at the police department?
I came in the following morning with the statement. I remember asking Jensen to sign the witness by. I think he said that wasn't necessary, just to hand it to Detective McCarthy.
And that's what you did.
Yes.
And your signature, is that your signature on page 1 of Exhibit 15?
Yes.
And is that your signature on page 2 of Exhibit 15?
Yes.
And is that your printing, period, Hawk, on the fourth page, upper right corner of Exhibit 15?
I believe so, yes.
Now take a minute and look at the narrative that you wrote on Exhibit 15. And when you've had an opportunity to completely read that, let me know. I'm going to ask you some questions about it.
Okay.
All right. It indicates in the first sentence that on January 12th, you went to the farm market, and that's on Fisher Road.
Yes.
What route did you take to go to farm market from your home?
I believe I took Kirchhoff to Fisher.
All right. And which way would you turn on Fisher to go to the market?
Left.
All right. And did you park in the parking lot for the market?
I usually park on the street.
All right. Is that what you did that night?
I believe so.
All right. And it says, apparently, when you left the market, the next sentence says it was near dusk. You see that?
Yes.
Now, near dusk to me refers to either that time frame right before or right after sunset. Is that what that meant to you? That it was dusk?
Dusk lasts quite a bit longer than right after the sunset.
Well, do you know how long twilight lasted?
I believe till approximately 6:30 that evening.
Well, if the National Weather Service were to indicate that twilight ended at 5:53 p.m., would you have any scientific manner in which to disagree with that?
Which twilight? Nautical twilight? Astronomical twilight?
You're
or
familiar with
civil
both
twilight?
of those terms, correct? What is nautical twilight?
I believe it's when the sun is 12 degrees below the equator.
And what is actual twilight?
Civil twilight?
Yes.
I believe when it's 6 degrees below.
All right. Civil twilight, 5:53 p.m. Any reason to disagree with the National Weather Service's description of that?
No?
And you wouldn't disagree with the fact on January 12th, 2010, that sunset was at 5:21 p.m.?
No, I don't disagree.
And you wouldn't disagree with the National Weather Service's description that on January 12th, 2010, the moon set at 2:59 p.m.?
Don't disagree.
All right. Do you know what a waning crescent moon is?
Yes.
What is that?
The crescent moon is the new moon. I believe that.
Is a waning crescent a new moon or an old moon?
I'm not certain.
All right.
A crescent moon is
Well,
a crescent moon.
there can be a right crescent and there can be a left crescent. And if you can cut your left hand on the blade of the crescent moon, it's a new moon, correct? You ever heard that?
Yes.
All right. But a waning moon is used to describe the moon as it is becoming an old moon.
Okay.
Have you heard that?
Yes.
All right. Now, you didn't describe in Exhibit 15 a particular time anywhere that you either went to the market, left the market, got home, etc., but you did describe the lighting condition that you perceived when you drove by this event, and you described it as dusk, correct?
Near dusk.
Well, it doesn't say, it's got near dusk, right?
Yeah. Near
All right, fair
dusk.
enough. Were your headlights on?
Yes.
Were your fog lights on?
You mean the high beams?
Now, do you have fog lights on that Jeep?
I think there were. I usually didn't operate the fog
All right.
lights.
Were your high beams on?
I believe when I approached the two vehicles, I think I did turn the high beams on.
All right. And your home's at Maras and Kercheval, correct?
Yes.
Then you state in the third sentence that you saw a woman sitting on the edge of the break wall across from St. Paul Church on Lakeshore. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
You don't mention anything about any men standing over her, do you?
In that sentence?
Right.
No.
Well, anywhere within your narrative, do you mention any men standing over this woman sitting on the break wall?
I think further down it says I saw two men.
Right. But you didn't indicate that they were standing over her. You indicated how tall they were, their estimated weight, their complexion. They were wearing long dress coats, correct?
Correct.
Any reason why you didn't put in your narrative what type of headwear these individuals had on, if any?
It looks like I did not include that. I believe I told the investigators the day before, or described everything.
Are you certain you told the investigators the day before that either of these gentlemen were wearing headwear?
I'm not certain, but I believe I did.
And didn't you already testify that when you turned in this statement on the 19th of January, that it contained the most pertinent information that you had at that time?
Objection.
Go ahead and answer.
Form, foundation, and you're mischaracterizing his testimony previously given.
Thank you. You may answer.
Could you restate, please?
Could you read that back, please?
Didn't you already testify that when you turned in on
Yours.
Tuesday or the 19th of January, that it contained the most pertinent information you had at that time?
Yes.
All right. You've already testified it was truthful as well, correct?
Yes.
And but for providing the partial plate, you didn't provide in writing any other information to the Grosse Pointe Farms Department of Public Safety other than Exhibit 15, true?
I believe so, yes.
How were you able to determine that the figure you saw at the break wall was actually a woman sitting on the break wall?
Because I can tell the difference between a man and a woman.
How far away were you from where this woman was sitting when you made the observation? Were you still behind the first parked car, or had you started to go around the parked cars when you observed the woman?
I observed her both from when I was behind the car and when I was in front of the Lexus.
So when you were behind the car, would you have been further away from the woman than when you were by one of the parked cars?
When I was by one of the I'm not clear on what you're asking.
Well, as you moved through this scene, your distance from this individual on the bank of Lake St. Clair on the break wall changed, did it not?
Yes, as I approached, I came closer.
And then as you went around, did you get closer yet? If you know.
When I was behind the car, I think it was equidistant to when I was in front of the Lexus. The lady was between the two cars.
How long was this lady's dark hair?
Seemed about shoulder length, a little bit longer.
But you didn't put that in your statement anywhere, did you, the length of her hair?
No, I just stated she was wearing black clothing and had dark hair.
You didn't describe the clothing, did you?
Yes, I did. Black clothing.
Describe whether it was a coat, boots, winter parka. You didn't describe anything like you did with respect to the dress coats that you described the men were wearing. True enough?
Yes?
Do you know how long that woman had been sitting there?
No, I don't.
Do you know how long either of those two cars that you saw had been parked there?
No, I don't.
Would you consider this point in time to fall within the rush hour of a Tuesday on Lake Shore at that point in time?
No.
No. Okay.
There were the cars ahead of me, there were maybe 3 cars. It was very sparse traffic. And that's when I first spotted the woman. The other cars were having to veer around the cars that were parked.
How many?
So they were slowing down and going around. So I noticed a little bit of a loggerhead there.
How many cars in front of you did you notice going around the scene?
I believe there were 2 or 3.
How many cars behind you?
None.
Did you look behind you before coming around the parked cars?
Yes.
So there was at least some period of time when you were moving that you weren't focused on the woman or the men. True enough? As short as it may have been to look in the rear view mirror.
I believe when I switched lanes, I checked the rearview mirror for traffic.
All right. And so however long that was, you weren't looking at the activities that you've reported in Exhibit 15. True enough?
For that half a second, yes.
Given half a second. All right.
Maybe a full second.
Okay.
Check the rearview mirror.
And I'm assuming you're starting to accelerate during that time frame as you're going out into the other lane.
No.
You kept the same slow walking pace.
Yes.
When did you first accelerate away from this scene?
After I had rolled down my window, turned back to see if the woman signaled in any manner of distress, and she didn't. I saw the second man. I thought he was familiar. It looked like JoAnn Matouk.
Well, given the fact that you thought this looked like JoAnn Matouk, did you pull over and say, "Hey, John, what's going on?"
No, I hadn't spoken to him in 30 years.
I understand that. Even more reason if you recognize him, and you've already testified this seemed to be an unusual situation to you. Any reason why you didn't pull over and investigate further?
I'm not an investigator. I don't have police powers to.
Do you need police powers to talk to JoAnn Matouk?
I just didn't stop.
And you likewise didn't do one bloody thing to alert this person on the bank that you were there, such as honking your horn, flashing the high beams, yelling out your down window, "Hey, are you okay down there?" You didn't do any of that, did you?
No, I had told you before I put the high beams on.
That was just so you could see the parked cars in front of you, correct?
Just to get a better view
Did you take
of the scene in the cars.
any activity whatsoever that you were doing to alert the person that you saw on the break wall? Yes or no?
Did I do any activity to?
To alert that person of your presence.
No.
Okay. Now, can you tell me where in Exhibit 15 you mentioned the identity of JoAnn Matouk?
I didn't mention the identity of JoAnn Matouk because I wasn't certain it was him. I said it resembled JoAnn Matouk.
Where does it say it resembled JoAnn Matouk in Exhibit 15?
It doesn't. That's what I testified to earlier.
All right. You testified today, earlier, that you believed it was JoAnn Matouk, and you knew that as of January 12th, 2010, correct? That you believed one of the men was JoAnn Matouk.
Resembled JoAnn Matouk very
Right.
strongly.
Very strongly.
I
Not just a little bit, but very strongly, correct?
hadn't seen John in over 30 years, so people change over
They may have, but it's your term that it strongly resembled, not mine. True enough?
Yes.
All right. And that remained your belief that one of the individuals you saw resembled JoAnn Matouk, at least up to the time you were interviewed by Bill Randall 2 years later on January 27th, 2012. True enough?
It's still my belief he resembles John Matouk.
All right. So, was there someone else besides this individual that looks like John Matouk you now believe you saw on January 12th, 2010 as well?
It's a little bit complicated. Could you say that again, please?
Sure. It's still your belief that one of the individuals that you sketched out on Exhibit 3 and 4 strongly resembled John Matouk.
Yes.
That's still your belief as you sit here under oath today.
Yes.
Now, has there come any point in time when you have subsequently determined who you believe the identity of the other individual is?
The first person? The first man?
Yes.
Yes.
When did you first determine in your mind the identity of the second man that you saw on January 12th, 2010?
You just switched it. We're talking about the first man, I thought.
There's two men that were there, correct?
Yes.
And you've told me that the first person that stepped out led you to believe they had a weapon, true?
Yes.
That person never showed you a weapon, did they?
No.
You never saw anybody on January 12, 2010 with any type of weapon near this individual, the woman, sitting on the break wall, true?
I perceived he had a weapon.
And he was up by the car at that point in time, correct?
He was standing in front of his license plate to block it. Yes.
How do you know he was standing there to block it?
Well, he was blocking. He was at the rear of the car in front of the license plate.
So he was standing in an attitude that kept you from seeing the license plate, regardless if he intended to do that or not, correct?
Please say that again.
He was standing in front of a license plate, impeding your view of the license plate, regardless of what his intention was, true?
I had already seen the license plate.
Before he came up?
Yes.
Where did he come from?
From where the woman was at the brake wall, and it seemed like he was at the same spot, but towards the curb, towards where the cars were.
So he was up by the curb, not on the brake wall. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, about 8 feet from the woman, 10
At least
feet.
8, 10 feet, correct? And that's what you put on your diagram that you drew for the Grosse Pointe Farms.
Yes.
You don't have either of those men anywhere down on the brake wall by the lady, do you?
I have the one behind the first vehicle and the one in front of the second vehicle.
And they're both in the street, correct?
As I drew them?
Yes.
Yes.
And that's where you saw the first man, when he was by the license plate. He was in the street.
He came from between the two cars. There's a brake wall and there's some grass. He was on the lake side of the curb. He came around, walked around in front of the first, behind the first car. Second man walked around in front of the second car.
So when you first saw these two men, they were near the curb of Lakeshore.
I believe so, yes.
All right. And did you ever measure how far that curb is from where you believe this lady was seated on the brake wall?
No, I didn't.
But I think you said in your estimation you would agree at least 8 to 10 feet?
Yes.
Okay? Now, the person that you believed on the evening of January 12th, 2010, strongly resembled JoAnn Matouk would be the second man identified on your diagram.
Yes.
When did you first, if ever, determine the perceived identity of the first man that you have written on your diagram?
I believe it was at Michelle's lawyer's office,
What year?
2014.
After this lawsuit had been filed, correct?
I'm not certain of the exact date.
Well, did somebody tell you that, hey, that first man was somebody?
No? Well,
Who did you discover at the lawyer's office the first man was?
I believe they'd shown me some photos.
Who's they? Mr. Radner?
Yes.
All right, how many photos did he show you?
I'm not-
4?
I'm not certain. He said, does this, any of these resemble the person you saw? I said, yes.
Who else was in the room when this went on?
I believe Ari Kresh.
Who else?
Their legal secretary,
Who else?
myself.
Gotta
Anyone
change
else?
tapes. Change tapes.
George Mann switched tapes.
All right, let's go off the record.
Off the record, 123.